There's a long-standing tradition of bands making films, from Eminem to Pink Floyd to the Ramones to the Spice Girls. And Studio 666 is the Foo's first full-length feature film. I mean, it was bound to happen at some point, wasn't it? Dave Grohl has been dipping his toe in movie production for some time now, being the main creative force behind some of the Foo Fighters' funniest music videos over the past 25 years or so. And so in many ways, Dave has really been sort of warming himself up to eventually have a stab, pardon the pun, at his first full-length feature film. And in many ways, Studio 666 does not disappoint. The story begins with the Foos wanting to do something a little bit different for their 10th studio album. Fun fact, for the band's 10th album, Medicine at Midnight, they actually did end up renting an old house in Los Angeles to stay and record the album. And the band did actually get a little bit spooked while staying there. And naturally, Dave had the bright idea to make a film about the entire experience. But this film goes way beyond a simple haunted house story. Studio 666 finds the band in somewhat of a creative rut. The band are keen to do something different and special for their 10th album, and are looking to band leader Dave for inspiration to, quote, find the sound of the next Foos album. But Dave feels as though the well is running dry and that he's already written his best songs. So they decide to rent out an old mansion in LA's San Fernando Valley in the hopes of finding this new sound. But when Dave begins to have supernatural visions and people start to go missing, it's clear that something is very wrong. Dave then gets possessed and starts to kill off his bandmates one by one. The film is well paced and there really is never a dull moment, but it's a film consisting of clunky dialogue, slapstick brutality, rigid acting and a lackluster plot. But these aren't exactly all negative things. Let me explain. The film has a playful and comedic vibe, and so the low-budget special effects actually work towards the film's advantage. The film definitely pays homage to the low-budget science fiction and horror films of the 90s, and it executes the kill scenes perfectly in such a comedic way whilst preserving the suspense and foreboding leading up to that moment. And the haunting and creepy sound effects throughout the film I thought worked really well. And I thought that they kind of trod the line between comedy and foreboding and horror perfectly. As I mentioned, the supernatural kind of creatures that we see throughout this film and the gory visuals do look a little bit low budget. But that's exactly what they were going for, and it's a success in my book. Now, to my surprise, the Foos all looked fairly decent on camera, to be honest. Each of the band members looked fairly natural, and they all play exaggerated versions of themselves in the film, which instantly makes them more likeable, relatable, and familiar feeling. However, some of the band members definitely looked a lot more comfortable than others, and this was pretty damn funny to watch. If you've followed the Foo Fighters for many years now, just like I have, you feel somewhat attached to their infectious personalities, and you really feel like you know the band personally. Well, this film definitely rewards those people. It's definitely a film for the fans, and watching the band have so much fun making this film just makes you fall in love with them even more. Dave was 100% the best actor, but that's no real surprise to me. We've seen him in Tenacious D and The Pick of Destiny, and he's had a whole host of other acting roles in music videos in the past. And his performance is pretty damn killer, if you ask me. Possessed Dave is just so goddamn funny. You need to watch it. Remy's acting also came across really naturally. He plays in the film what I can only assume is a very exaggerated version of himself. He seems to spend most of the film actually just lusting over the hot girl next door, which is quite funny. Taylor, Nate and Chris were pretty good, but by no means Hollywood standard. But in many ways, this kind of bad acting, offbeat acting, almost fulfills the brief even more and makes the film better. And it really contributes to that kind of low-budget horror sci-fi film vibe that the band were going for. And then there's Pat. I mean, Jesus. Pat, what are you doing? Put your back into it, Pat. Come on. Not great. But again, I think that kind of offbeat vibe that Pat was giving off really contributes to the film and what it was trying to go for. It was actually so funny, and I just found myself laughing my arse off from start to finish in the cinema. Pat was just awesome. I mean, the film even has a Coldplay gag in it. 10 out of 10 for me from a comedic standpoint. Just great. So there's this one scene where demonic Dave, i.e. possessed Dave, has gone full control freak and is trying to get the band to play what he wants them to play. Now in this scene it's pretty clear that he's half out of his mind, clearly possessed, he's headbanging wildly, and then he proceeds to start shredding. Now I know that Dave is a very talented musician, but even I wasn't convinced that he was shredding. And then I saw Steve Vai's name in the credits, and put two and two together, did a bit of googling. Turns out Steve Vai actually played the guitar in that scene. And the sound that comes out of that guitar is just unbelievable. The earth-shattering riffs that Dave is playing throughout the film are just heavy as. And in many ways, I kind of wish the Foos would have used those riffs on their actual 10th album. But I guess that's a conversation for another video. So in conclusion, I've got to give this film a solid 8 out of 10. I think it's important not to be too hard on the guys here. Remember, they're a rock band making what is essentially a low-budget horror/comedy film. It's hardly going to be The Shining, is it? For Legacy fans, Studio 666 is just a really funny film that features a band that I've loved nearly all my life. The film is just full of everything that you could want. Mind-blowing heavy riffs, hilarious special effects and kill scenes, and brotherly banter. And the band look like they're having the best time making this film. And for me, it's impossible to walk away from this film without having a warm, fuzzy, happy feeling inside. Yes, it's a horror film, but it's actually a really good feel-good film, if that makes any sense. And I love the Foos even more after watching this, if that is even possible. And you know what? I quite like to see other bands replicate something like this, to be honest. Dave did mention on Jimmy Kimmel the possibility of turning this into a series of films, with each subsequent film featuring a different band. And so with that thought in mind, what other bands would you like to see make a full-length feature film like this? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it. And with that, I'll see you next week.